All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, setting you up for a week 9. And of course, the huge matchup in the SEC Eastern Division. Always a rivalry, always intense, always means something between the two states and the two programs, but national implications this year with Florida and Georgia. And I believe ranked in the top 10, both teams for the first time since 2008. We got David Waters from Gators Breakdown standing by. It's always a great discussion with Dave. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. Busy week, of course, here, Mark, in Jacksonville. College game day, SEC Nation, CBS 3:30 game. It's a national event for this. We're not supposed to call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Not anymore. I asked somebody, it was a Georgia girl, that when that ceased, because I slipped and I said it. I don't know if I'm going to be fined or I'm going to have somebody at my door tomorrow. What's going to happen? I'll get something in the mail. Possibly,
Everybody says it, but the schools.
And I get it, but
yeah.
A little hypersensitive. I think we can let some phrasing go at times. I completely agree that the younger ones shouldn't be partaking, but let's loosen up. Let's have some fun. It's been a long-standing tradition. All right, Florida, Georgia. What's great here, Dave, is that, man, if this were a month ago, Georgia hadn't proved anything, but based on what they accomplished last year and the recruiting rankings and the expectations and everything we thought Georgia was, and maybe they still will be, versus Florida having, they lost to Kentucky by 3 touchdowns, or they lost, mixing up games. That was Mississippi State. Not quite so bad for the Gators, but losing at home against Kentucky before they had really proven themselves as a team to be reckoned with. We had a certain status placed in the SEC East that reasonably, if we're not holding on to those expectations and the brand and what we thought was going to happen, just to look at the results of what these two teams have produced, this should be razor tight. And if anything, Florida's proven a lot more than Georgia at this point in the season.
Yeah, Mark, both teams, you get in trouble if you use the transitive property in college football. You can't do it. But the common opponent, a couple common opponents here, but the big one, of course, being LSU. And LSU had to travel to Gainesville to the Swamp, and Florida walked out with victory there. And just a week later, Georgia had to travel to Baton Rouge, and LSU put it on Georgia. So you can get in trouble if you want to compare that game. But if you go back and look at that game for Georgia, is it an overreaction of what happened in that game? Is it an overreaction? Is Georgia still one of those top tier teams that, like you said, coming into the season, we thought they were? I come into the season, I had Georgia on the pedestal. I thought they were one of the 2 or one of the 3, 4 best teams in the country here. And it turns out that if you go and look at their schedule, Mark, what's their best win? Over a South Carolina team, over a Tennessee team? We don't really know yet. They got punched in the mouth by LSU and weren't really able to respond there. So Florida fans, and I think for a good reason, have a good reason to be confident going into this game. Different from what we thought coming into the season, and coming off that Kentucky loss there, and I just got off the radio show here in Jacksonville, Mark, too, and we were actually talking about Florida in that Kentucky game as well. And I was like, you go back and look at it, and where we see kind of Florida at right now, and where we see kind of Kentucky at right now, that game may be more of an outlier and an exception than actually what's kind of playing out right now. Kentucky coming off a Vanderbilt game where they had 18 yards passing, and we're lucky to come out of that game with a victory. And you've had Florida beating Mississippi State, you've had Florida beating LSU, you had Florida going on the road beating Tennessee, and now got a top 10 matchup against Georgia, and we'll see where it goes from there. So you look at all these SEC East teams, but particularly Florida and Georgia right now. We'll learn a whole lot about these teams after Saturday.
Absolutely. And Georgia, would I expect if they played 10 times in Death Valley that they're going to lose by an average of 20 points per game? No, the teams are much more closer than that. And certainly they would win their share, and it would be a great game most of the time. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. They got beat up in that game. Before we focus on Florida in particular, as a guy who keeps your eye on Georgia in particular, the SEC East and the entire conference, any particular thoughts about the handling of Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, obviously coming into these games but not being allowed to really stretch the field or do anything risky throwing the ball, and just your thoughts about how things are handled right now?
Well, Mark, you just mentioned stretching the field, and that's kind of where Jake Fromm has struggled so far this year. Not the same type of quarterback hitting those balls down the field that he was last year. You know, if Georgia can run the ball about as good as they have last year, they're not relying on the run as much last year for whatever reason. They even in that LSU game abandoned the run too early and put too much on Fromm, and they turned the ball over, and he was getting pressured and didn't react to it too well. So I am a bit surprised Jake Fromm hasn't taken that next step. He played really, really well as a true freshman, and he's kind of been status quo, maybe even a hair worse than he was last year. So, we'll see. I think the schedule gets tougher coming up as well for Georgia. We saw with the LSU. Now you got Florida and you got Kentucky next week, so we see how he reacts there. And the whole Justin Fields thing, looks like they're not putting too much on his shoulders as well. You hear a lot behind the scenes that a lot of people think he can throw the ball. We just haven't necessarily seen it so much this year. I do think with the bye week, with the wrinkles, look, I don't think there's a quarterback controversy, or at least there shouldn't be anyway. Jake Fromm is the guy. Justin Fields will still play like he has some, up to this point in the season. I do think there'll be some type of, I won't call it a trick play, but there'll be some type of wrinkle where they'll let Justin Fields throw some. He may if he's throwing more than 5 times or something in this game, more than likely that means I think Florida's probably doing something pretty well, and for whatever reason he's in there throwing the ball. But I think there will be those 1 or 2 plays where Justin Fields there's going to be some type of wrinkle that this Florida defense or Todd Grantham's not expecting, where Justin Fields is going to throw the ball down the field. So it's just a prediction of mine coming off of, bye weeks, and you can look and reassess the situation here. But I do think Justin Fields, he'll be in this game. He'll run the ball, but I do expect him to put the ball in the air a little bit as well.
No doubt. We've got Kentucky in play, but most people would consider this, the way things have played out thus far, and look to project for the rest of the season as the game of the year in the SEC Eastern Division. And again, if anybody's given Kentucky respect, it's me. In the rankings and so forth. I'm just basing it on that 4-game stretch that I think is pretty remarkable, that Kentucky was able to beat Mississippi State by 3 touchdowns after they beat Florida on the road by 2 scores, and then come back and beat South Carolina by 14 points, and then go to Texas A&M. And sure, they didn't win, but they didn't lay an egg and get blown up by 4 touchdowns. They took them to overtime. So I'm like you. I looked at that box score and saw 18 yards passing out of Terry Wilson. And I just don't know if this is sustainable. And that's why I felt very confident taking Vandy in 13 points. I was like 98% sure Kentucky was going to win, but I was about 98% sure they weren't going to win by much, just because of their style of play. And it's just, it's fascinating in 2018 that they're able to sustain it, at least to this degree, when Benny Snell is going to get 28 to 32 carries and Terry Wilson's going to run around a little bit. But basically, on a good day, he's going to hit like 8 of 14 or something like that. Right. And otherwise, man, they are just not throwing the ball at all.
No, like I said, you go back and look at that Florida game and the way he was, look, they ran for over 300 yards, don't get me wrong. But you had David Reese out, you had CeCe Jefferson out, and one of your starting cornerbacks, Marco Wilson, went down on the first drive of the game. So Florida was, trying to figure out things on defense. It was only the second game of the season. And, I still look at that game right now. All the credit in the world to Kentucky for coming into the swamp and beating Florida. But the way it looks like it's playing out right now, maybe more of the exception instead of the rule this year.
So, David, Florida sits at 6-1. Obviously, the one loss to Kentucky. So as I look through the games and based on what I've seen and studied and so forth, there's not really anything that jumps out to me as, wow, Florida is playing so much better than I expected them to play. Wow, they beat this team or did this against that team that I didn't expect. Although I got to say, going into the season, or if I was thinking about it preseason, I would have thought, okay, Mississippi State, Florida in Starkville, I'm expecting the Bulldogs to be an 8-4 type of team. Yeah, I'm leaning that way. Mississippi State, once we got to the game, I actually picked Florida to win that game outright. But in the preseason, I thought Mississippi State probably wins this game 60% of the time. Obviously, the LSU game. LSU not expected to do much preseason, but once we got to that point against Florida, that's a huge win. So what's the difference between what you expected? What units on the field for Florida have improved or are better than you expected to get them to this point?
Mark, of course, start with Felipe Franks. Is he a Heisman quarterback throwing for 300 yards a game? Absolutely not. Is he more trustworthy? Is he making better decisions? Is he not turning the ball over all the time? Absolutely. He's playing within this Dan Mullen offense. And look, I mean, the best example you can have right now is look where Felipe Franks is right now, and look where Nick Fitzgerald is right now. Dan Mullen is the cog there, and one is taking a huge step forward and one is taking a huge step back. And look, I mean, we knew when Dan Mullen was hired, the reason he was hired was to fix this Florida offense and to fix this quarterback position. He hasn't fully fixed it, but Felipe Franks is a much better quarterback than he was under Jim McElwain last year. So he's not making those boneheaded decisions that he made last year. He would take a sack. He would run out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage. He would throw the ball into double, triple coverage. And now he's just playing within the offense. They trust him. They trust his legs a little bit more. They've installed some speed option plays to get the running backs on the edge, and it has to go through Felipe Franks. He makes the right checks pre-snap, and if he can identify what's going on pre-snap, he's actually done pretty well so far this year too. So, I mean, and every game so far this year has been something different. The Charleston Southern opener of the season, 5 touchdowns. He's out by halftime. And then the Kentucky game, okay, yeah, we talked enough about that. He didn't play terrible. He played okay. And then they had in Colorado State, they bounced back nice. Special teams won that game. And then they went on the road and beat Tennessee. Then they went on the road, and he played within a screen pass heavy offense to neutralize that Mississippi State defensive line. And look, it helped. He played within the offense, and he's made timely throws, big throws, and not the game killer mistakes that he made last year. So that is definitely one, put a star by number one there. That's the big thing that coming into the season that was fixed that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And of course, the offensive line as well. Florida's only given up 9 sacks on the year. And Mark, you and I have talked about Florida for as long as we can remember, as many times for these last 4 years or so. And this offensive line has just been a turnstile, hasn't been able to bust a grape, consistently in the run game. And right now, that was my biggest liability on the team coming into this year. Not the quarterback. I thought Felipe Franks, I thought he could improve enough, but I was afraid this offensive line wouldn't help him enough. And they've actually come out and protected him well. There's Michael Pirine, Jordan Scarlett, Damian Pierce. The running game can get going a lot in the second half against LSU, the second half against Mississippi State. They've been able to really take control of these games and help get wins there. So the 2 biggest question marks I had were Felipe Franks and this offensive line. And right now, they're both at least average. And I'd put Franks, like I said, he's not great. He's not a Heisman quarterback, but he's just a hair above average right now.
We got David Waters from Gators Breakdown on the line. You can hear the insight and information from David right here on a fairly regular basis. But if you just want to dive in and get engulfed in Florida football, you either stay here at YouTube and you look up Gators Breakdown and join Dave and the rest of the team there for 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, live streams each and every week, or you go to your favorite audio platform and look up Gators Breakdown, and you'll find David right there and the rest of the team breaking down Florida football like no one else. You hear the analytics, you hear the fan perspective, you hear it all come together, the football breakdown, and they've got it covered. They talk recruiting. And speaking of which, Dave, the recruiting rankings, that's talk for the offseason. But I bring it into play because of this. George has obviously been recruiting out of its mind since Kirby Smart arrived, and even before that, Mark Richt was doing fine. Florida, maybe a step or a notch back. Certainly nothing wrong with what they've done, but to compete for potential college football playoff appearances, a step back. But we see it now every week in college football. We saw Ohio State get blown out by Purdue. Are those rosters comparable? Mm-hmm. We see USC with the best personnel in the Pac-12 based on recruiting rankings losing to Utah, and they're nowhere close to going to a Pac-12 championship game. So once the players start to get beat up and the coaching comes into play and the teams kind of find themselves, things change. So there's obviously somewhat of a talent discrepancy between these two rosters, but do you have any fear that shows up in any particular way?
I think you always worry about it, Mark. Is it a huge talent gap? No. Part of the reason is Florida is really healthy right now. But like I mentioned, Marco Wilson going down against Kentucky. But as far as the starters go, he's really the only starter right now Florida's missing, and they got all the starters along the offensive line are sitting there playing. Your quarterback's healthy. Malik Davis, one of the running backs, went down, but you got a stable of 3 guys already there. Florida's really healthy right now. So, and Georgia's dealing with some bang ups on their team, some injuries on their team. So that kind of evens out a little bit. Mark, I think where recruiting really shows what can really happen is when you're Florida and Georgia, your starting 22 are going to be pretty even. But it's when you get to your second string and your third string and who you throw those guys in with. And right now, since Florida is so healthy, the talent gap right now, it's kind of in this game. I don't really worry about it in this game too much. Jake Fromm maybe just a hair better than Felipe Franks. The way the running backs are playing and the way they're used, I'd say it's about pretty even. The wide receivers, I'd say kind of even right now too. Offensive line, probably you give the edge to Georgia just a little bit, but not much. But it's just Florida defense right now that I think is the equalizer in this game against what Jake Fromm has struggled with so far this year. He has struggled against pressure. He has struggled on third down, and that's what the Florida defense has excelled in. And I think that's more difference of the game. I really do think, Mark, I am a Stars Matter guy. Don't get me wrong. I am a huge Stars Matter guy. But for this game right now, I think it's a lot about coaching. I really do. And if it's a close game in this fourth quarter, I'm putting all my chips on Dan Mullen before I am on Kirby Smart.
Interesting statement there. That's pretty definitive. So in looking at the chat room, Dave, I'm just curious because we've got a guy that joins us on a regular basis here, comments on all the videos practically, and just is ingrained in Mark Rogers TV, which I enjoy. But he's a huge Gators fan, so I'm just wondering if do you recognize George? He just goes by George. Does he follow you guys?
He is on every Gators breakdown as well. Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that connection was made because if it wasn't, there would be something wrong here. I figured even if I introduce him to Gators breakdown, he'd ditch me forever.
I do know the name George. So yep. George is there.
Yeah, George is a character, but he loves the Gators. He might be a little delusional at times, but he loves the Gators. All right, man, is there anything that we haven't talked about regarding this matchup that you think is intriguing about this one?
It's just the big plays, Mark. I really think this game comes down to big plays. And I hate to harp on last year's game. Jim McElwain was getting fired, and we had death threats, and he told the team right before, during the pregame meal that he's going to get fired. And, the mentality of that team going and playing in that game, there's no telling where it was at. But still, Georgia came out, dominated, 42-7 win, ran all over Florida for, I think, almost 290 yards or something. And still just look, not only that game, but how Georgia plays and the big playability that they have with those running backs. And if those running backs get going, the big playability that they have to play off of play action and hit deep passes down the field. And I really think that may happen early on in this game. I think Georgia's going to be pretty aggressive, see if they can, get Florida down pretty fast. How does Florida weather that storm? I do think Georgia will come out very aggressive. Can Florida keep up early on? I think the first 7-8 minutes of this game, I think, are probably going to be the most important. If Georgia gets up, pretty quick, then I'm not sure if Florida can come back. But if it's a close game after the first quarter, midway through halfway through the second quarter as well, then I think it's one of these games that's going to be set up for a classic. So weather the storm early for the Gators, and I think they got a good shot at taking this game when it's all said and done.
Got David Waters from Gators Breakdown breaking down Georgia and Florida. David, we've talked about it in previous years, but give me another go on why does this one have a different feel on the field, in the stadium, around the tailgating, everything. And you've obviously, Florida's one of those teams in the SEC that's got its Florida State's, got its Tennessee, got some other rivalries going. But what makes the juices a little bit different in this one?
Well, Mark, for me, I was raised in South Georgia, so all my best friends are Georgia fans, and I hear it every day. I grew up around the red and black, raised as a Gator fan. So this game is personal for me, means more to me than any other game. But hey, look, top 10 matchup. We didn't expect it when the season started. We expected Georgia to be in this top 10. We didn't expect Florida to be here. Kind of a surprise matchup when it's all said and done. And look, Gator fans are excited where Dan Mullen has got this program headed right now. And in year one, to already have a Florida-Georgia game where it means this much. You got, as I mentioned earlier, you got College Game Day coming to town. SEC Nation is going to be here. You're the CBS game. And it definitely is the game of the week. It's not a strong schedule this week in college football. So if this is a game like predicted, like I think it's going to be a close game, then all the eyes are going to be in this game to see who can win this top 10 matchup. And after last year and after the whole Jim McElwain fiasco, I think Gator fans are really just ready to let loose and give Georgia a run for their money. And it really starts. I don't know how much of a signifier this game is either way for the future of Florida football, but a win here, and we're already talking how much Florida's ahead of schedule. A win here, and you kind of set yourself up to represent the SEC East in Atlanta. It speaks volumes for what Dan Mullen's been able to do in his short time here.
And based on the round robin between Florida, Georgia, and Kentucky, I just say this again because I like saying it and because it may not hold for too much longer. Kentucky's they're one up. They're in the driver's seat.
They hold the tiebreaker.
And of course, for David's appearance here, the newly unveiled Florida helmet reaches the set display with the rest of the SEC here, so it's nice and bright and shiny and on the top shelf right there. Georgia, Florida. David Waters joining us from Gators Breakdown. David, you can jump off the line if you had anything else to talk about in regards to. I know that you had mentioned Florida's perception at this point.
Yeah, well, I'll get one thought from you. Yeah, one thought from you, Mark, before I go here. And a lot of Gator fans are claiming, a lot of people don't remember that Florida beat LSU just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so I think that the national rankings way too often reflect preseason bias, even going 7-8 weeks deep into the season. And I think it hangs on for a lot of teams. And I do think the one factor in the LSU resume is that they do have a very strong resume. So if you took away that game, that they do have one of the stronger resumes in the country.
Mark, are we putting too much on them beating a Miami and Auburn team, though?
It sure looks like it.
Neither one are no longer ranked right now.
Yeah, I think that Miami and Auburn are good wins, but they're not top 10 wins like we perceived at the time. So, yeah, the LSU resume is depleted a little bit, but they're still really good programs, still good teams that are, top 25, 30 kind of teams at worst.
And I think they deserve to be right where they're at. It's just a lot of Florida fans feel that they're not getting enough respect for beating that LSU team, because once LSU beat Georgia, now they're automatically again one of the nation's best teams.
Yeah, and you guys weren't expected to do a lot. I think like number 22 in that range to start the season, something in that range. And the offense isn't wowing anyone, and it shouldn't matter. Because if you're winning games 50-48 or you're winning them 2-0, you can in both cases say, well, there's something wrong and there's something really right about what we're doing. But people are just enamored with scoring. So you don't have the big play passing attack. Your quarterback's not looking great. Now, again, insiders like the improvement that's there that watch all the games. But in terms of wowing anybody with any big scores or big pass plays or a passing offense, that seems to move people as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just conversation fodder. But hopefully after this Saturday, then no more questions about if Florida's respected or not. So,
yeah, if you guys don't come with a win, I'll be shocked. Now, David, I'll also throw out to you before we let you go that NCIS Fanatic 21 is looking for a pick'em in his league. Now, if you unveil your prediction at some other point in the week, just let us know. I'll let NCIS Fanatic 21 know that my predictions are coming out tomorrow. So I definitely like Florida with the points right now. I've not picked a winner on the game, but we'll get to that tomorrow from my side. But David, if you're prepared, certainly we got somebody on the line that wants a pick.
Yeah, I do like Florida in the points here. And I try not to be biased. I really don't. I do have Florida 24-20. I think what Florida can do on defense to stress Jake Fromm the key is getting Florida or getting Georgia into those passing situations. If Florida can't get off, if Florida lets Georgia run for 5-6 yards to pop on first down, then kind of forget what Todd Grantham's defense can do. Todd Grantham's defense is built to get the opposing offense in third and passing situations. And when Jake Fromm is in third and passing situations, he does not excel. He's actually not that great in that situation. So I think what Todd Grantham can do on defense sets up very well for what Georgia can't do in those passing situations. And I think it just rears its head where I think it plays out a lot like that Florida LSU game. And it's a close one-score game in the fourth quarter. And give me Dan Mullen over Kirby Smart in a close fourth quarter game.
There you have it. He is David Waters from Gators Breakdown. You can join the show right on YouTube, the video there, or any of the major audio platforms, Gators Breakdown. David, we always appreciate you stopping by. We know you got a lot going on. But setting us up on this one, especially.
Mark, a little plug before I go. I had Reese Davis on, Game Day's host.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, since Game Day's gonna be here in Jacksonville, Reese Davis joined me on the last episode of Gators Breakdown.
So everybody got to get over to see that. I will check that one out as well. That's great.
Yeah, he did really good. Did really good. So a lot of good info there.
All right, David, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
So I will just let everyone know that we'll do a little administrative tasks here before we let everyone go. I will take a call or two if you'd like to call in at 860-325-3687. Then I'll be off to watch the NFL, and no reason to watch West Virginia Baylor. I saw a couple touchdowns that were pretty pathetic by the Baylor defense. Weren't really invested in tackling or chasing anyone down to throw a shoulder into anyone. It was 41-0 the last I saw. But I did see Virginia Tech's first touchdown pass against Georgia Tech. I understand that one's a close one, exciting game, close to halftime, something in that range. I may come back to break down Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech once I watch that on DVR and catch up with the final score and the NFL as well. That's on my radar. I know I got a lot of big college football fans who despise the NFL watching me right now, but I love catching up with the NFL as well. So we will let you know that last night's live stream, we featured Ohio State, Georgia, and Kentucky. What I was aiming to do for some of my other channels, including Mark Rogers TV Ohio State, was download that, edit off those clips, and supply those conversations there, most notably with Steve Hellwagon. Unfortunately, YouTube, there's an issue there where the video has not stopped processing. Therefore, it won't be downloaded for me to edit and upload. Therefore, you're just going to have to take the entire show as is with Ohio State, Georgia, and Kentucky analysis and a phone call in there talking about the Clemson Tigers. So just a little bit there. All right. We have a prediction out on Boston College and Miami. You can catch that right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I also have a different, it's the same prediction, but I also have a Miami-Boston College video released on SG1 Sports as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
My name is Ken.
Hey, Ken. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. How you doing, Mr. Rogers?
I'm doing just fine. I appreciate you calling in.
Yes, sir. I'm from Louisiana, and I have two teams, ULL, of course, and then for LSU. And with respect to your last guest, they barely beat LSU in Gainesville. I mean, he came down to the end of the game.
Sure.
And he threw pick six. So he's talking about the way he was talking, like he doubted LSU should be where they are. And you barely beat them. And LSU has the best resume, in my opinion, in America right now.
Absolutely. I think so, too.
And if they beat Alabama, what people going to say now? They're still not going to rank them number one? If you listen to ESPN and all these pundits, they still wouldn't put LSU number one, even if they beat Alabama, because they say they're going to put Alabama in the playoff regardless. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy with the Alabama bias. But anyway, like I said, LSU has the best resume in America. It's unfortunate Devin White won't play in the first half, but the great defensive coordinator in Duranda, I think he'll put something together. I think that stadium will be more electrifying in the history of LSU football. I think it is at night, And when Devin White steps on that field in the second half, because I believe LSU will keep it close in the first half, it will be, man, you think they start on the field against Georgia. They're going to tear up Baton Rouge, not just Tiger Stadium.
Absolutely. All right, Ken, I got something to run by you because I know that David made the statement during our conversation that he had no issue with where LSU was ranked. He just thought that Florida should be given credit for the win head-to-head. Regardless of where the game's played, you got to win the games, and Florida can't determine where the game's going to be played. They flip-flop the home and away in that series, of course, and they just happened to be in Gainesville, and they won the game. And it was an extremely close game. You can't look at the 8-point difference. Obviously, you guys were down by, 1 point, 20-19. There was a pick six right at the end of the game. But yes, you have what I believe you have played the toughest schedule to date, and I've not done the analysis recently to look it over again. I believed Florida State to have the best, most difficult schedule at the preseason, but things have changed in the ACC, and the ACC is really looking bad. But LSU has the best resume in regards to who they've played, but you obviously lost one of those games. And Florida's lost a game as well, but they beat you head-to-head. So I honor that in my rankings. So I release rankings every Sunday, my top 25, and I believe that LSU, I had you ranked for a number one for a number of weeks before anybody else had you anywhere close to number one. I ranked you number one after you beat Miami. And that continued until the Florida game, but I've got to honor the head-to-head. And so that's why
I agree with you. I agree with you.
So where would you rank these teams?
Well, I agree with you in the fact, but what you got to understand is LSU was not even ranked at the beginning of the season, and in most polls, and somebody put them in 25. So to come from 25 to where they are now is incredible. Ed Orgeron should be the coach of the year, in my opinion.
Well, let's hang on until the season's over. If we're going to award halftime, half-season awards, I completely agree with you. But let's not do that. Let's wait till the rest of the season's played.
Well, I agree with you. But I don't see LSU losing any other games besides Alabama. Arkansas is not beating them. Rice is not beating them. A&M, questionable, but I don't think A&M is going to beat them. So this is the game of the year as far as LSU, I think, for the nation, because I think everybody in the world is going to be watching this football game. It's the game of the year, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
The game of the year.
Yeah.
Well, let's consider something that could take into account a whole lot of perspective on game of the year. Is it the most important game? Well, for LSU, it is. Maybe not for Alabama, because they probably still get to the playoff with. They can probably lose and still get to the playoff without going to the SEC title game, just like they did last year. That's a possibility. Right. LSU has to win this game.
Right. And that's why I'm saying this is the game of the year for LSU, because if they win this and win out, they go to the championship game, but Alabama's still going to be, I said that earlier to you, Alabama's going to still be there with one loss because nobody else is going to beat them. The only team that can beat Alabama right now is LSU. I'm talking about in the SEC. I'm not talking about Clemson, and I don't think Clemson can beat them. We know Ohio State can't beat them. So LSU is the only team, in my opinion, that can play with Alabama and beat Alabama. It's the only team. I can't think of no team right now in America that can play with Alabama, even win against Alabama right now. Is LSU? It's the only team. Do you agree with that? That's
what it looks like in watching the games. Alabama has been so dominant. They end every first quarter up 28-0, basically, regardless of who they play. Tennessee, Ole Miss, on down the line. They're crushing everyone. They're annihilating everyone. The scores don't even do it justice because, as you know, right out of the gate, game one against Louisville, it was 51-14. Well, that game could have been 75-0 if they wanted it to be. Tua is playing halves of games, and they are just annihilating people. So I agree with that, but I have an issue with them having only played Texas A&M as being the best opponent they've played. So I've seen situations like this. We all have, where somebody looks close to this dominant and then things change. So you're telling me, based on your analysis, that Alabama is the best team in the country and LSU is the second best team in the country. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, because LSU have the talent, they have the defense, they can run the football, they can throw the football, and their special teams is outstanding. And I think they have one of the best kickers in America.
Okay, absolutely. He's missed only 2 kicks, and he's done a great job. I think you just laid out the Clemson football team for me. They have 2 of the best backs in the nation. They run a third guy. Trevor Lawrence is a freshman quarterback, sure, but he's now gaining some steam and really throwing the football well. They have an elite wide receiver core. They have the best defensive line in the country, and the rest of the defense isn't too shabby either. So I would have difficulty selecting that game, but I think it would be rather close. I got to see a little bit more out of Texas. I'm not sold on Oklahoma because they don't play defense, so forget them. Michigan, obviously, a Michigan LSU game would be fun to watch as well. Those are the teams I would put in the argument. And obviously, from a talent perspective, strictly talent, we know Ohio State is a top 5 team in terms of talent, but they have real issues that go beyond what the star rankings and the recruiting. So yeah, they're playing like garbage, and so we can't consider them.
Right. But I'm just so proud of where LSU has come from.
You should be.
Being unranked and to go to where they are right now, when Ed Orgeron was supposed to be in the hot seat, LSU was going to be 5-7, 6-6. I mean, that's what most people were saying across America. And look where they are. Ed Orgeron is not a coach. He's a recruiter. Well, we see that's not the truth. But anyway, we're going to see. And I can't wait for that game. I mean, my goodness, if they win that football game, I'm telling you, Mr. Rogers, I'm telling you right now, it's not going to just be storming the field. They'll pay that $250,000. That ain't nothing. That's chump change. They're going to tell Baton Rouge, period. I mean, that would be, see, Georgia, okay, we know now Georgia is not as good as Alabama. Right? That's been proven, okay? They got destroyed by LSU, all right? But let me say something to you. Alabama defense is not what people think it is. It's not that great. It's not. The offense is great.
We don't know, Ken. And this is the reason I say that. Yeah, they got torn up by Arkansas, and they got torn up and scored upon by some other teams. Missouri, in fact, didn't score a lot of points, but gained a lot of yardage. The only thing I question about that, though, Ken, there's a difference between your defense showing up when the score is 24-20 in the fourth quarter versus when you're up by 5 touchdowns. I can't tell how good the defense is when they give up garbage touchdowns and garbage yardage. And that's all the kind of football that they've played. They haven't been pushed. So
what I'm telling you is, Mr. Rogers, is I'm telling you right now, Alabama would not put no 28 points on LSU in the first half in Baton Rouge.
I don't think so either.
That ain't happening. That's not going to happen. There's no way. They've been beating everybody like that, but who have you played?
Well, the best team they've played by far is Texas A&M.
LSU, right. LSU has been battle-tested against big-time teams. Everybody was saying, oh, this team got the best defense in America. They got the best defensive line. Auburn, Miami had a great defense. All these schools supposed to be great defenses. And LSU ran the football, threw the football on. Now you're going to say the same thing about Alabama. Oh, Alabama, the best thing since sliced bread. Well, we're going to find that out in November the 3rd, how good they are. We're going to see if they're going to have 21 points on LSU in the first half. I'm not buying it for one split second.
All right, Ken, we're going to find out, and certainly I'm going to have a prediction on the game, but not this early. I've got to think this one over because
I know you're going to pick Alabama. I know you're going to take Alabama. You should, because they're number 1 team in the country. But I'm just saying, Alabama is not blowing LSU out in Baton Rouge. And I'm going to call you again on November the 3rd or the day after, whatever it was, and I'm going to tell you, I told you so. They're not going to blow LSU out. That's just not going to happen.
All right. I'm not arguing with you. I'm not arguing with you. I just think that LSU, based on what they've shown us this far, just can't get behind by too much. I don't know that Joe Burrow and that offense can sustain and play that kind of game. I think you want to keep that in the mid-20s.
No, I agree with you, but I'm saying that Alabama is not going to blow LSU out. That's what I'm talking about. Like they've been blowing all these other schools out.
Okay, I tend to agree with you. There is no question that LSU is going to be the best team that they've played by far.
Right. And Tagovailoa, Mr. T, he is great, no doubt about it. But he ain't 100%. And if he ain't 100%, we gonna find out he's gonna be in trouble. And Jalen Hurts can't throw the football. He can run the football, but he can't throw like Tagovailoa. So if Tagovailoa get knocked out that game, they definitely not beating LSU.
Oh, it's a different game. So I did an SEC college football playoff scenario a few weeks ago, and I said the exact same thing, that I predicted Alabama to make it all the way through, win all its games, win the SEC championship game if Tua is the quarterback. I predicted not that Jalen Hurts couldn't. We've seen him go to 2 national championship games. It's not that he's not capable, but it's just a completely different offense and limited with him. I said that if he's not able to play, and this was right after the game in which Tua got hurt with the sprain, that if Jalen Hurts has to play, that they will lose in Death Valley.
Yeah. Well, you're so smart. You know all this stuff, man. I'm not. I do a little bit of research, but I'm not like you. But I thank you. I like your program because I was watching Uncle Lou and some others, you know. And
sure.
You have the analysis. You have, but you have more insight, though. You know, all those guys. I mean, I'm not, dogging them, but I've seen a lot of them, Uncle Lou and all them on there, and Pete, and there's so many others. But anyway, but I like your program better than all of them because you have the statistics, you have the analysis, you do the right thing. You're not going by what ESPN, CBS say. You're doing your own analysis and you ranking them as you see it, and that's what I appreciate your on YouTube. And I'm gonna start watching you from here on out. This was my first time watching it, and I said, this man know what he's talking about. I'm going to give him a call, see if he's going to answer my call.
I appreciate that, Ken. So when's the first time that you watched?
It was like a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. And certainly we all have our different approach. And we had Uncle Lou on the other day, and we love Uncle Lou. So we all have our different approach in the way we do it. And certainly Uncle Lou's been very successful, and he's fun to watch, and whomever else we could fill in the blank. I try to support everyone unless they're unprepared and they're just don't know what they're talking about completely. Then, but I appreciate you jumping on the line as an LSU fan. And Ken, you're welcome to call anytime, and obviously join the chat room.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking my call.
Thank you so much, Ken. Appreciate it. You have a great weekend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So that was Ken, the LSU fan. I don't know what his hands, but he's only been watching for a couple of weeks. So it's good to hear from Ken. We had another call coming in during that time as well. I think it's coming back in. And believe me, folks, I really want to do this call-in business the right way. It's an off-season project. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's George, Mark.
Oh, it's George. So, George, I was glad to hear that you are well aware of Gators Breakdown and follow them and watch them.
I knew him before I saw your channel.
Oh, absolutely. Really? Okay. Because Dave and I go way back about 4 or 5 years. We actually had a venture together called SEC Breakdown, and that's exactly what happened. It broke down, and it had nothing to do with.
I would have been around for that.
Oh, man. It was fun. It was fun. We had big plans, and it had nothing to do with Dave and I or any issues there. It was Dave and myself and 2 others. Mike Laval, you'll see him covering Tennessee football on here, and then another gentleman who's not in the business right now. And the 4 of us had big visions of putting together an SEC platform. We had a website built, and we were ready to roll, but things didn't work out. But it was a whole lot of fun for the time that it lasted.
Yeah, I don't understand why it didn't work out. Maybe you need to reformat it and do it again. There was a country called SEC Country Live or something.
Yes.
They had a thing going, and big crowds, and it dropped off too.
I will send you a video from way back in the SEC Breakdown days, because they're still on my channel. And actually, David's channel that's now currently Gators Breakdown was SEC Breakdown. and had our videos on there. And then once we disbanded, I certainly, the best thing to do was for David just to take that SEC breakdown channel and run with it. And he's done a great job.
It's kind of a wearisome thing waiting for it to pop on the internet, right? Like, because, it doesn't seem like one comment here or there matters or a like or something, but eventually you go viral and it pops and you got 15, 20,000. Uncle has 15,000,
Yeah, so he's running away with it, and that's great.
It's exponential once you get going.
Yeah, I don't know what that secret is. It's not popping for me right now. So
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Hey, anyway, my life is flashing before my eyes. Everything hinges on Saturday. This is a big deal. This is everything rolled into one.
It's a big one. Yes.
I mean, if we make it and maybe if Mullins really as good as we hope he is, we don't trip and lose to some stupid Idaho or something, we're in the playoffs. Jeez.
Yeah,
wow.
Forget about those future games. Focus on Saturday and have a good time watching Georgia. And do you feel confident?
Okay.
Are you confident?
I give Georgia a 0% chance of winning. Zero.
You haven't
I have
consulted.
No respect for Georgia.
You haven't consulted Vegas.
Vegas is freaky. I don't understand those people. Maybe there's just so many people that think Georgia has a chance. Still take that bet. I don't know.
Well, Vegas considers Georgia to be 7.5 points better than Florida.
Is it really that high?
Yes. The last I checked.
Okay,
I'll give it another look. And
whatever, man.
I'm hoping it stays right there because I've yet to delve into that arena this weekend, but I'm going to go that route, and I certainly like Florida with the points. I've yet to make my prediction on the game, but with the points, I like Florida.
I've been betting a long time in football. That don't even make sense. Would somebody break their leg I don't know about or something? What are we talking about?
Not that we've heard. It seems a bit strong, yeah, a bit heavy.
Oh, well, I hope the fix ain't in, man. God, it can't be. That's too obvious. Florida's definitely going to win now. Screw that.
Well, don't worry about what Vegas says. They're wrong about, on the top 25, about 5 or 6 times a week. We track those things.
Okay.
So
interesting. 5 or 6 out of 25, huh?
So that's the top 25. So it's less because hang on, George, because some of the top 25 teams play each other. It's not 25 games. It's about anywhere from about 19 to 22. And I track this, and out of those 19 to 22 games, the underdog wins straight up about 5 or 6 times a week. I've got it all right in front of me somewhere, but anyway, it's about 5 or 6 times a week, about 25% of the time.
Wow.
And that's what I'm trying to track and get a read on. And it served me fairly well with my predictions. And I should, you can keep talking, George, because I'll find my prediction record here, because you're typically you're typically you're typically impressed with my prediction statistics. If I could find them here, I don't think I've got the notebook in front of me, unfortunately, but I'll be spewing that out here in the next day when I make my next week predictions. But we've been doing rather well. And rather well tonight as well, as I locked into some games. Obviously, this West Virginia game against Baylor's a disaster, and Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech are playing tonight, and that looked like it was a good game close to halftime. So I'm going to check that one out. I've got that on DVR, and we'll give that some analysis too.
Yeah, I was watching them all earlier. Split channel to channel.
All right, George.
Who's Notre Dame play this week?
Notre Dame plays Navy, I believe.
Navy.
I haven't totally looked at the schedule, but
I need an upset, man. It's just going to ruin my day at Notre Dame if it gets in there and takes up one of those spots.
Yeah, your best hope is a little later in the season when they hook up against Florida State and USC. They've got those 2 games coming.
Yeah.
Even Syracuse. Yeah. Syracuse has been decent, and they've played. Obviously, they took Clemson down to the wire, and Notre Dame has to play Syracuse. So that's possible.
All right. Is Dave off the line?
Yes, he is.
Okay. But, right now, now, the way things are unfolding, it's only that crazy man Lance and Jasper that's picked everything perfectly, and his reasoning still stands true and everything. So Lance is going to get to go ape shit freaking crazy if Florida pulls this out, and I hope they win in convincing fashion to leave no doubt. You know,
George, I have no idea what you're talking about. Lance and Jasper.
There's a guy called Lance and Jasper,
all right,
and he talks to Paul Feinbaum, and everybody accuses of being on meth and shit because he keeps rocking back and forth. But truthfully, I rock back and forth sometimes too. Yeah.
Okay, and this guy's a bit of a whiz in predicting football games, apparently.
No, just this specific year, he said we're going to the playoffs before the year started, and everyone just laughed him into oblivion, and they still do it. But he's like, the only miss was Kentucky, and I think the Kentucky loss was important to us to get it out of the way, you know, and get serious. We can't afford one more.
Well, you better hope that Kentucky can't beat Georgia, or regardless of what you do, Kentucky's going to go to the SEC championship game. You realize that, right?
I hope that Missouri wins tomorrow against Kentucky or Saturday, and Georgia loses to Kentucky. That would make my day.
Well, yeah, that's your perfect scenario right there.
Yeah.
Then you beat them both down.
That's part of my reason for saying this is next year, Georgia could be a juggernaut. You know, but this year they're just freshmen with a questionable head coach. He hasn't proven nothing yet. He had somebody else's 5-star team before this, so we'll see.
Well, that's not entirely true. He had a part of a roster, which that happens to a lot of coaches. They take over programs, obviously, and they've got to keep the kids. They can't send them off somewhere and say, bring on my 100. So Kirby Smart took over pre-2016. That was his first season. So he had that 2016 class was partially his, and the 17 class. So everybody on the field that was a freshman or sophomore.
I did it a little bit overhandedly, but nevertheless, I wouldn't have lost last year's national championship, and I'm not even a football coach. If I would have had that lead at halftime,
you're not blowing that one against Alabama.
No way.
Okay.
Tua or not. I mean, what happened on the last play? Give me a break. What was that? Are you crazy? We never saw that play before. Oh, was that? Come on.
Well, what was surprising to me about that play is that conventional football wisdom tells you that you're down by 3 in overtime. You just took a sack, and it's like 2nd and 19, something like that. So what most teams do, George, they start throwing little screen passes and dinking and doinking because they're just trying to get themselves back into field goal range to extend the game, not thinking if we go for it, now we're at 3rd and 19, and we're probably out of field goal range, and we're screwed. So most teams play a conservative.
I'd have left one man back personally. You know, I'd have left one man back. I would not have gave up the end zone like that. That's insane.
Yeah, it was a wide open field.
But, you know,
they did have a safety, but he didn't.
That's on Kirby Smart's permanent record. You know.
Well, what's also on his permanent record, though, George, is that a program that has not played for a national championship since 1980, in his 2nd season, was playing for a national championship and came within overtime of beating Alabama to win the national championship.
Look, I can already see Uncle Lou's video, so I'm sure I'm right. I've envisioned it. It's going to be great. You know Uncle Lou, the guy that cheers for Georgia?
Absolutely. We had Uncle Lou on last week. He's great.
Yeah, I saw that. I remember that now.
Yeah.
All right. You got any callers?
I don't have any calls. I'm going to wrap this thing up. If nobody else wants to call and talk, I'm just going to get everybody set up for what we've got in store for the weekend. Then I'm going to go watch a Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech play.
Yeah, it's the good time of year right now. Here we are. It's the high times.
Absolutely. It's just getting too cold outside. That's the only problem for me.
Even in Portland, it turned fall or winter a couple of days ago, whatever's going on here.
Yeah, it went straight from summer to winter here. That's what it felt like. Yep. It was like pushing 80 degrees about 10 days ago, and it's like 35 out right now. It's brutal.
Yeah. All right, check your tires. Make sure you got good tread and all that.
Absolutely. I just got the tires changed, actually. So thanks for the heads up, George.
I only say that because I slid a little bit day in a heavy rainstorm. I went, oh shit.
Okay. Yeah.
Go change these tires.
There you go. All right.
See you later, guys.
All right, George.
Everybody in the comment section.
Thank you so much, George. Enjoy the game.
Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Everybody like the video, please.
Thank you, George. Always appreciated, man. Have a good one.
See y'all later. Bye.
All right, George. As only George can let everyone know that they should like the videos. And I am not a YouTube whiz. Obviously, I've got 5,800 subscribers. If I was doing this right and I knew all the analytics and how to market it and brand it and post the videos at the right time, there's a whole science to it that, you know, with a full-time job and then doing this about 40 hours a week, I'm working like 100 hours a week just doing what I'm doing. I do need to pull back and learn that stuff and do it better. But what was going to be my point? So I don't know, by you liking, in all honesty, I have no idea what that does when you like a video and I put a video out there and let's say 500 people watch it and I get 3 likes versus if I get 300 likes. I have no idea. Although I hear that the likes and the comments, in addition to the views, the likes and the comments, so we can't control the views, but if you are watching, you can control the comments and the likes. So once this video posts, all the chat room goes away. So it needs some comments and some likes that help drive it, and it gets it into that feed of suggested videos. And I've had people comment to me, oh, I was watching some college football videos and your video popped in there as a suggested video. That's what we want. We want people, I don't want to be talking to space. And I appreciate the 25 or 50 or 75 or 100 faithful Mark Rogers TV viewers, obviously, but we want it to be 1,000 and then 10,000 and then 100,000 faithful viewers would be great. So again, it's Texans, Dolphins, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and it's, oh, well, the game's over. West Virginia is crushing Baylor. But I want to let you know before we pack it in for the night, and I most likely will come back with some sort of take on Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. That, boy, I've got so much. This is the other deal. When you do what I do and do it like Ken was saying, I try to do my homework. So I got, you know, stacks of notebooks everywhere with notes that I lose track of what I'm doing. So I will just have to go off the top of my head to let you know that tomorrow we will have more Florida Georgia coverage at 11 a.m. Eastern time with another live stream with Jackie Franciulli. And she covers Florida football. And she has joined us in the past. It's been a long time since Jackie's been on, but she's going to join us at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I have yet to decide whether that needs to be a live stream because I can only be on for, I'm guessing Jackie's only going to be on for, let's say, 40 or 45 minutes at the most, probably less than that. So I don't know if I'm going to make that a live stream or just release that as a video later, another Georgia-Florida perspective at noon Eastern time tomorrow. Noon on Friday, every Friday, noon Eastern time, I do a live stream for SD1 Sports. And some people may be asking, why are you on SD1 Sports? Well, it makes a whole lot of sense from a number of angles. They have asked me to provide them with college football content. They've asked me to do previews and predictions throughout the week. They've asked me to do live streams. And so Chris does a nice job over there. He has graciously asked me, believing that I can add something to their channel by taking the calls and doing the live streams and also providing my previews and predictions. So I've been asked to do that, and I'm obviously being compensated for it. And they have 21,000 subscribers, and I've got less than 6,000. So it's working better over there. He knows the analytics and can reach a broader audience. And what can happen? I can provide my live streams and call-in shows, previews and predictions over there, and hopefully drive people over to Mark Rogers TV. So that's the thought process there. And when I go like that, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm that smart or it's going to work, but that's the thought process of doing some work for SD1 Sports. So we've got videos over there. So that obviously takes away from what I'm doing here. So instead of having a Michigan State, Purdue preview and prediction here and Penn State, Iowa, and Wisconsin, Northwestern, and also a betting angles for week 9. I've got all that over at SD1 Sports. So maybe it hurts my channel to a certain extent, but I expose myself to a broader, larger audience, a different audience that now knows about me and what I do. And hopefully I can send them right here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So let's see. So that's the deal on Friday, 11 a.m. Jackie Franciulli covering Florida football, talking Dogs and Gators. At noon Eastern time, we've got a live stream over at SG1 Sports. And then let's see, at 1:45, right back here at Mark Rogers TV, Scott Wolf, Inside USC, joins us to talk USC. And then who knows what else I'll talk about later in the day. But we've got a big Miami-Boston College game on Friday night. So you can be sure that I will be, if not previewing the game, which I've already done, I will be here at halftime and after the game to do post-game instant analysis, Miami and Boston College, with the Canes needing to win, Boston College needing to win. They both have one loss in the ACC, and both are at 5-2 on the season. I know I have more Miami fans watching this channel, certainly, than Boston College fans, but certainly I will be covering the Boston College angle as well. Then on Sunday, over at SG1 Sports, we've got a live stream at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's going to be each and every week. We did our first this past week, and maybe I was a little blurry-eyed at 11 o'clock in the morning because of my late-night schedule, watching all the college football and then analyzing it and going through all the stats and recaps all night. But 11 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday, we will wrap up the college football weekend, and we will do it each and every week over at SG1 Sports. And I skipped over Saturday, and you guys were asking for a watch party. And unless something in my personal life and schedule changes, why don't we just go nuts? Clemson, Florida State at noon, then come right back with another watch party for Georgia, Florida at 3:30 Eastern time. And we'll provide the instant analysis as it happens. All right, I'm going to check out the live chat one more time to see if anybody's commented on anything. And here pretty soon in the next few weeks, we're going to provide a channel update and get your suggestions on what we're doing here at Mark Rogers TV. So I'm just going to pull up the live chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I don't know if you guys caught my helmet video. The helmets have arrived. I counted 8. I ordered 11. There were 3 more on the shipping list that did not arrive. So I don't know if they're going to catch up with me or what's going to be the deal there. All right. Gator Chops 7321. Keep uploading videos. We will do that. Thank you. If that's your only suggestion, we will be doing that. We definitely will be doing that. And if you see back here, we added Florida and LSU to the rest of the SEC that we already had. And if you didn't see the helmets video, they're arrayed on the floor right now, and I will be coming up with different configurations. I don't have Georgia, or I would have put Georgia, Florida up there. Jay, good to see you. Happy Thursday night. Clemson alum 98, who called the show for the first time last night, enjoyed that conversation. Per conference, okay. In the SEC, we've got the 5 displayed right there: Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU. In the Big Ten, we will now have Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 3 from the Big Ten. The ACC represented by Clemson and Miami. So that's it. In the Big 12, we've got Oklahoma, which made it, and Texas was ordered but didn't come. So it should be Oklahoma, Texas. In the Pac-12, we've got USC and Washington. I think we've covered it all. And then we've got Notre Dame. And a group of 5 is on its way as well. Oh, Florida State was ordered, and that has yet to arrive as well. Florida State, Clemson, and Miami in the ACC. So I think I've done a decent job of trying to get to all the major powers. Yes, Georgia fans, I missed you. But other than that, we've Penn State, sure, Nebraska, Michigan State, we could go down the line. All right, what else do we have in here? The college football playoff should also consider doing schedule for the teams who win 11-plus games. Conference championships teams should at least have 2 11-win teams on their non-conference schedule that includes the group West End. I don't know where you're going here. So you're telling us, I think, that for anybody who's won at least 11 games in a particular season, the next schedule should include teams with 11 plus wins. So those teams they're going to be playing each other, which is good. I understand your point. You want strength of schedule. So for Ken, who's just started watching in the last few weeks, and maybe some of you, I take care of all that in the off season and have for many years. So last off season, we broke down what the schedule should look like, both in conference play for each conference, because it's not fair. It's imbalanced in every conference, and also nationally what the schedule should look like. These schools should not be running around by themselves with their own agenda, making their own schedules. The schedule should be, there should be a scheduling committee. And so I've explained that in previous videos. And the SEC, let's take the SEC for example. They have imbalanced scheduling. So you play everyone in your division. You only play 2 of the 7 teams in the other division. Therefore, there are 14 teams in the SEC, and you miss 5 of them. You don't play 5 teams in your conference. That's way too many. The other thing that happens is that they lock into the cross-division rivals. Therefore, LSU and Florida always play. Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Vandy, Mississippi State, Kentucky. Did I say LSU and Florida, Auburn, Georgia, the cross rivalries in the SEC? So then the one other game that you play against the other division, that rotates. So you play your rival, then the other one rotates. And I'm probably speaking to a lot of people who already understand this. The problem is that, let's say, again, I'm not picking on the SEC because this is a problem in almost every other conference, that if you're Alabama, you always play Tennessee. So Tennessee was 0-8 in the SEC. Therefore, this makes Alabama's schedule decidedly easier than anybody else, especially when the rotation comes up and the other games against Missouri. So I have shown, and I pulled out the big board a number of times. And there you did get to see probably that I do wear the dress shirt with the sweatpants. All right, and sometimes the shorts. But I got the big board out, as I do many times during the off season, to break down what's not fair about that scheduling. There was a year about 5 years ago when LSU and Alabama, Ken, you can listen up for this one because this is when LSU was in its glory, right after the 2011 season, 2011, 2012, when the focus of the SEC was, okay, Alabama, LSU rule this conference. Who's going to win that game? Is this fair? In this particular year, I believe it was 2013. Okay, LSU, Alabama. They all played, all the teams in their division, of course. The 2 games that Alabama played against the East were against 2 teams that went 1-7 the year before. So Alabama's 2 teams that they played in the other division in the East went 2-14 the year before. I believe it was Tennessee and Vandy. The 2 teams that LSU had to play in the Eastern Division both went 7-1 the year before. So you have 2 teams competing for a division championship who have the exact same schedule for 5 of their 8 games, 6 of their 8 games. So the other 2 games are huge. The difference between those 2 opponents. And LSU in this particular year had to play 2 teams that went 14-2 the year before, and Alabama played 2 teams that went 2-14. So I have fixed that, and the video is posted, and it was posted a long time ago, and I won't tell you how I fixed it now. And it's not just the AC or the SEC; it's the ACC and the Big Ten as well. The Pac-12 is closer because they only play against 12 teams, and they have 9 conference games. Therefore, you only miss 2 teams. Therefore, the schedules are pretty equitable in the Pac-12, and we know in the Big 12 they're perfectly equitable because everybody just plays everyone. In the ACC and the SEC this year, there were examples that I gave where there were teams who played 2 teams in the other division who went 12-4 in the conference the year before competing against other teams in their division who were playing teams that went 4-12. It makes no sense. It can be worked around. It can be figured out. I did it. It just takes a notepad. It doesn't take a genius at math, where it's almost perfectly equitable, where everybody plays two teams in the other division, whether you're in the SEC, the ACC, or the Big Ten, although the Big Ten plays an extra game, that went 8-8 the year before. And no, you can't predict how much better or worse these teams are going to be the next year, because that's the first complaint I get from people. Well, you don't know how good these teams are going to be. You could try to even out the schedule. Yeah, we can't predict, or should we? We shouldn't try to predict how good teams are going to be in the future, but you can only base it on the previous year's records, and you make it equitable. All right, I'll get off my rant, because that one bugs me, as do the rankings that don't make sense. And that's why I release a video each and every week that says the top 25 that actually makes sense. And yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. I left out West Virginia, and people hammered me, and rightfully so. But I had them on my list. And then when I just put it on the next list that I could actually read, I just missed them. They were supposed to be numbered 19. So if you're in the TV business, you've got production assistants. We call them PAs. So that's what I need, is a PA that can keep me in line when I miss things like that. I'm just checking out the live chat to see if anything's there. Otherwise, I'm going to go check out some Georgia Tech. All right. We appreciate all of you guys jumping on board, and we'll be back with more Georgia, Florida tomorrow. The live stream at SD1 Sports at noon Eastern time, and then back here for USC Football Talk at 1:45 Eastern time with Scott Wolf from Inside USC. And we will blow out the Miami-Boston College coverage tomorrow night, as well as, even though only like 12 people will watch it when I talk about Indiana and Minnesota, that's fine. I will talk about Indiana, Minnesota. I will DVR that game and check it out. We will see all of you guys soon. We appreciate the support. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you on Friday or later tonight.